All right, Jason Khalipa, thank you for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. I'm glad we're riffing about recording on podcasts. I think that a lot of people have podcasts, a lot of people have YouTube videos, whatnot, but you know what the worst is, man, when you're recording a podcast and then you get all the way through it and then the audio wasn't recorded or it came out really terrible. That
Right.
sucks.
Yeah, that has happened far too many times to me. And now you're scaring me.
No, don't worry. We're recording. We're recording. We're good to go.
Uh, so let's get this thing going here. Like many people who started in CrossFit, that's how I started. I'm involved in more Olympic weightlifting, dabbled in Jiu Jitsu a little bit. But like many people who began through CrossFit, they know the name Jason Khalipa. And one of the things that I saw some video where you ended up winning the CrossFit Games back when it was in Aromas, and it really surprised you that you actually did. You didn't know
Yeah.
that it had happened.
Yeah.
I guess, how was that feeling? But then also, what was it like to be a part of something that was exploding? Like that maybe you didn't realize that it was exploding, but like the following 2-3 years, that was the real CrossFit explosion.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, so I won the games in 2008. At that point, it was cool. It was great. It was awesome, but it wasn't as important or as big of a deal as, later on in life, I ended up getting, second and third. So I got back on the podium and I also competed for Team USA a couple of times. Those ones I'd say from like a feeling of accomplishment, I feel like those ones were better than the '08 games. And the only reason for that is that I had more work that led up to that point. It's like anything in life, if you accomplish something great, but you didn't really work that hard for it, it feels good. But if you have accomplished something great that you've worked years and years and years, and you're the only person that knows all the sacrifices you made, and then you accomplish that goal, it just means more to you. And so later on in life, so I competed from 2008 till 2016, and I accomplished some things, but probably getting back on the podium uh, was the biggest accomplishment, I think, for me.
Yeah, because that was the changing of the guard. So like CrossFit had finally become professionalized. I mean, to a
Oh yeah.
certain extent, right? Especially the way that people trained.
Oh
So
yeah.
one of the things that I love looking at is, and I don't know if you follow surfing that much, but we all know
Of
who Kelly Slater is, right?
course.
So
Yeah.
there's a video of him facing off against John Florence, who's like the current guy, him and his brother, and there's a bunch of other surfers now. But John was a kid who grew up surfing pipe at like 12 years old. And for the longest time, for decades, that was old man shit. That was like seasoned veterans surfed pipe. Now you have 12-year-olds doing it. Now those kids grow up and the surfing now is absolutely ridiculous. The coolest thing was seeing Kelly Slater be an absolute beast back, a decade ago, and then face off against the beasts of today. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he's the veteran, but he was able to train and continue growing and changing and getting better, even though he was the veteran. And that's what I feel like you were able to do to a certain extent in CrossFit. I mean, the difference between the 2008 games and the 2016 games must have been insane.
Yeah, massive. I mean, and you look at what the legends or what the OGs or whatever you want to call them have to their advantage is experience. And your body eventually does break down a little bit. Your body does get beat up a little bit, but the experience is just because there's so many people that are really good in their garage, but when they try and actually go perform out in front of the lights, they can't perform as well. And so those experiences, the only way that you can get better at competing, competing in itself is a skill set. And because you need to learn how to compete, take Olympic weightlifting, you have 6 lifts and you need to learn how to the only way to get better at competing is competing because you don't know what your body's going to feel. You're going to have to learn how to adapt and overcome and evolve. And so that's ultimately what I did for a lot of years. And it's cool to see the sport grow. I was able to see the first real money come in with Reebok sponsorships and being at the Home Depot Center. It was great. It was awesome. And to now see where the sport's at is incredible. It was a great ride, man. It taught me a lot about myself and it taught me a lot about other people. That's probably the biggest takeaway I had from the CrossFit Games is like what happened in between my ears more so than the physical benefits.
So I have to bring this up.
Sure.
And Jason, I have to bring this up.
Oh boy, it's going to be a
we
controversial moment. Let's see.
we need to talk about the softball throw.
Oh, fuck. How did you even, so you know what's funny about the softball throw? Dude, I don't know if like I hired a company back in the day that I don't remember, but dude, it's all been deleted from the internet. I can't find it.
No
on the internet.
way.
Dude, I swear, there's a picture of me. So I've looked up this softball throw because honestly, I'm at a point in my life where I don't even care anymore. Like, let's use it as a joke. Like, hey, so for those who are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, in the 2000, I think like 11 or 12 games, I was in a pretty, dominant position. I was in, one of the top performers. And one of the events was a 50-point event, which they had never done before. But a 50-point event compared to normally it's 100. And the goal was to throw a softball down a lane on a football field, but you had to stay within like your 6-foot lane. If you went outside that lane, it didn't count. And I didn't know how to throw for shit. And that was a pretty embarrassing moment on ESPN2. But I don't know where it went, dude. You could try and research it. I can't find it.
I had to bring that up, man. Because look, I've actually, it's weird to think about because when I started CrossFit, I felt like the noob. I started CrossFit in 2013. And I felt like it was, the boom it was mid boom, maybe even late boom. I think the boom really hit in like 2011, 2012. And, we always used to talk about that. But one thing I would like to point out though, like I think probably my favorite event of yours, and now I don't know if you won this one because I'm thinking about Garrett Fisher, but the Burden run.
Did the Burden run? I did. I did.
So okay, so that is like it might be one of my favorite performances in games history. I thought that was the coolest. That was the coolest competitive event I've ever seen, and you're the winner of it. So it's like, it's just that was an amazing event.
So going back a little bit, and then we'll go back to the Burden run for a second. The 50-point softball throw was a mess. I performed terribly. It was embarrassing. And it's funny. One of my peers at the time, one of like our coaches at the gym, he played in the minor leagues for baseball. And so he was an all-star. His name's Alex Rollin. And he was trying to give me pointers beforehand. And dude, it's just like, it just wasn't. I threw it more because I threw the shot put in high school. Mm-hmm. So I was throwing it more like a shot put and less like a baseball. Anyways, the second event though of that was the L-sit. So I don't know if you remember this. I actually ended up winning the next event of the L-sit hold. And so I kind of redeemed myself there a little bit for that year.
Okay. So it was one of those two-parters.
It was a two-part, but moving on to the Burden run.
Yeah. I would love to talk about the Burden run because the way that they portrayed that too in the in the what was it, like one of the films of the games, that was so cool. Yeah, it was the first time they'd really done something like that at the games.
Well, I mean, if you're a fan of the Burden run, then I'll kind of provide you some behind the scenes. So the night before the Burden run, and the Burden run, what it was a 3-mile run around the stadium. There was a little bit of uphill, a little bit of downhill as a byproduct. It was then you flipped a pig, and what a pig was, I actually have one in our office over there. It was almost like a tire, but made out of metal, and you flipped it down a football field, and it was heavy, very heavy. And then after you did that, you carried a log on your back into another stadium, and then you finished by dragging a sled 100 yards to win. And so it was a good combination of strength and conditioning. You start off with the 3-mile run, then you did all this other stuff. The night before, we're getting briefed on the event. This is like early on in the day. And Dave Castro, who was the director of the games at the time, was briefing us. And he said, hey, when you get in the stadium, you're going to have to carry this sled 100 yards, whatever it is. And I just remember visualizing myself, like I wanted to be the first person in that arena. Because if I got into that arena first, I knew I was going to win the event because I knew I'd be able to sled pull probably better than most people. I just needed to get into that arena first. And turns out the next day, I get into the arena first and I pull the sled immediately halfway. I gave myself some time to kind of like, at that point, no one else was in the arena. I just gave myself a moment to kind of like reflect on the accomplishment because a lot of times when you win events, I don't know if you've experienced this, I'm sure you have. When you win events, oftentimes you don't know you're going to win until you win. But in this case, I knew I was going to win ahead of time. So I stopped in the middle, kind of like embraced it, enjoyed it, all these people, whatever, finished it out, boom. So that was probably the best event of my career as well. So I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that visualization thing is crazy. There are definitely moments in my life where I've visualized that exactly what it's going to feel like. And then it actually happens.
Yeah.
And off the top of my head, it's like qualifying for nationals for me for weightlifting. Like I literally visualized it, and then there's a video of me actually doing it, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And I imagine that feeling must have just been incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a really good event. And it was, yeah, that was a good year. That was 2013, actually. So, going back and reflecting on the events, there was a lot of pros, some cons. Obviously, you never have perfect events, but that was one of those events where it just lined up, where your training lined up with execution. That's always great. Same thing with weightlifting.
So you were the first, at least off the top of my head, you were one of the first people to kind of branch off away from CrossFit. Not because I don't think it was because you were just like tired, like screw CrossFit, but it was more of like, hey, if this thing truly is universal, we might as well try and really make it that, and question maybe the methodologies that have been put forward. Not saying that they're bad, but just like doing something different. Hence, changing it from NorCal CrossFit to NorCal Fit. I think you were one of the pioneers in doing that. There's been some people that have kind of changed their ways as well. What was the goal behind that switching over?
So that's a complicated answer question, but the long and short of it is this: CrossFit came up as an affiliate model. So for people that don't know what that means, it's a license model, meaning that individuals can do whatever they want. There is no franchise. The fee is very low. The barrier to entry is low, and it gives a lot of autonomy to go do whatever you want, but you're going to be able to use the mark. Over time, I just had a difference of opinion with some people in leadership on the consistency that I was seeing on how the brand was being used. And when we were NorCal CrossFit, it was very difficult because you're getting mixed in with every other CrossFit gym. Instead of being able to define who we are, we were always defining who sometimes we weren't. And so we stayed an affiliate for a while, and then we ended up pivoting away. But now we're reaffiliated with CrossFit. Don, the current CEO, he's a member of our gym. We've had a good relationship for a long time. I think the future of CrossFit's really bright. There was just a couple of years where we didn't align with the direction of where they were going. And so we just wanted to be able to do our own thing and be in control of our own brand. But now we like what they're doing. And so we still have our own brand. We still have our own mission, our core values, our visions, where we're going, but we're able to affiliate with CrossFit from more of a methodology perspective.
Yeah, and I did notice this year, just personally, that CrossFit feels like it's back, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. I did not appreciate where it was headed and some of the things and some of the leadership and the things that I had heard. And I think ultimately, like as a business, yeah, that I think what you said was really, really amazing there. You're representing something that you aren't because you have to, right? Because the benefit of being an affiliate is that if somebody Googles where to train, like your name will pop up, but
Right.
that could potentially be limiting. I mean, it was you, Miranda, you had like a bunch of people there, and you had really good coaching, really, really good facilities. I remember you were like some of the first people in that area to like really be like, hey, let's make this thing amazing.
Yeah.
And you're somewhat limited then by the CrossFit name.
Well, I mean, ultimately, for me, I think with CrossFit, and I'm more bullish on this than ever, if you want to reach CrossFit's potential of reaching millions and millions and millions of people and not just being a niche fringe or whatever you want to call it, we need to be able to professionalize. We need to evolve, and we need to treat our business like a business and not a hobby. We need to have clean, great locations. We need to be able to pay our coaches more money so they can put out a better product on the floor. And ultimately, that's going to be good for the entire ecosystem of CrossFit. And so I think talking about the business side was never part of the cards with former leadership at CrossFit. I think now it is. And so I'm very excited about the future because I think that they're seeing that there needs to be a little bit more consistency. There needs to be a little bit more of like leveling up as a gym. So if someone goes in and has a poor experience, they don't go tell three friends how bad CrossFit is, but it's in everybody's best interest to level that up so that they tell how great it is.
There's quite a bit of there's quite a bit of gatekeeping in CrossFit, and it's what happens usually with these kind of cultish, and again, we call it cult things, but cult things can be very good. Like I just had Finn McKenty, who's a a big YouTuber in the music space, and he is heavily involved in metal music. And he gets really frustrated with metal because people aren't raising the standard in metal. And if they do raise the standard, there's a decent portion of people trying to bring them back down. Like, hey, this is our small cult thing.
Yeah.
Like, don't go away from what CrossFit was, these terms. And I can definitely sense it in CrossFit for sure.
That's funny. I didn't know that was even a thing in metal, but yeah, what you have is you have this cultish approach in the beginning, and
it's great. It's this guerrilla, like, it's awesome.
And there was very much so, like, the F you to everybody was kind of like the model back then, right? The Pukey the Clown, the anti-Globo gym. And it worked for a lot of years, and it was so great. And it put CrossFit on the map, and it was the antithesis of what was normal in the conventional gym. Use the clock, use the coach. We cared so much about coaching, which is excellent. But somewhere along that journey, it became not okay to talk about running a successful business. Somewhere along that journey, it became combative against other people. And I think that that's not the best path if we want to actually get CrossFit in the hands of more people. And so for the OGs, I would say, what's the goal? The goal is to impact lives. How many people are we going to impact if we stay niche? Let's go a little bit more. I don't want to say like overly mainstream, but just 10% more. Like, look at metal. I mean, metal's a great example. I'm so glad you brought that up.
So yeah, dude, we literally just talked about this, and it's like, okay, if you look at the 90s, so you had, this is great. Finn came up with this. He's like, there was Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit battling it out with 98 Degrees on TRL for the top spot. 98 Degrees, a pop band, it was like Backstreet Boys versus Blink-182. That doesn't exist anymore. There's no metal that has made it to the mainstream so that people can listen to rock, so that people can listen to punk, metal, and things like that. And if we were, again, draw that parallel to CrossFit, it's like, well, we have these established things, bodybuilding, weightlifting, powerlifting. CrossFit is this niche, and it's like us against them type of deal. But it's always going to limit you. It's going to be, dude, the cult, the Kool-Aid drinking, it's palpable. And when you're in that, it's great. It feels great, but the growth is limited for sure.
That's so funny. I remember when Limp Bizkit would, you're right, on TRL, like top 10 or whatever, but you're spot on in the sense that, like, I do think that more and more people, specifically leadership at CrossFit HQ, are realizing that opportunities to grow CrossFit, to get that brand of fitness into more people's hands. If we want to grow past where it's at today, things need to evolve and change. If you want to stay where you're at, then it is what it is. But that goes for the gyms too. We need to level up as an entire industry. We need owners to make more money, so that coaches make more money, so they can provide a better product to their members. That's what we need to do.
So you have gotten into jiu-jitsu, and that's actually where you and I first met, was at a jiu-jitsu event. I have since slowed down on the mats because I just couldn't separate myself from the mat. Like, I couldn't separate my personal life and my professional life from the mats. Like, when I took a step away from jiu-jitsu, I all of a sudden was making more money and doing better on YouTube and things like that. And that's a me problem. I just couldn't, I felt like a professional athlete, and I had to be on the mats all the time. But that's my story. I want to know from you. And actually, you know what? This is really funny. This is why I DM'd you in the first place to be on the podcast. I had this thought the other day. There are very few places where you finish up a class and you stick around. You just chat, and you're just like, everyone's energy is like, yeah, man. Blah, 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 blah. CrossFit is one of them, and jiu-jitsu is the other one. Right. Do you get that feeling when you were at jiu-jitsu? Like, were you part of the, again, like, here's another cult that Jason Khalipa is jumping into? Did you feel that at all?
No, it's just like, I'm part of a new cult. No, there are so many similarities between jiu-jitsu and CrossFit. It is undeniable. I mean, and I really feel like I'm hopeful that I could be one of the advocates for both. I was just talking to JP Dinnell and the guys with Jocko Fuel and those guys down with Jocko Willick down in Southern California, just talking about the benefits of both, and I had these conversations a lot with the gentleman at Sheepdog Response and Tim Kennedy. We actually have a fitness product together. And I find that a lot of people that are on the mats have incredible technique and really poor strength conditioning. And then I find that there's a lot of people that have great strength conditioning and absolutely zero awareness when it comes to self-defense or jiu-jitsu or combatives. And I think that there needs to be a blend of the two. And that's what I'm passionate about. I mean, I'm passionate about both of them, to be honest. One of the things that I'm working on is how to balance the training protocol. So one of the struggles that I get messages all the time about is if you do hard jujitsu, and at NC Fit at our gym, we like to use this term of RPE. I'm sure you've heard of it, rate of perceived exertion. It's not super common in CrossFit, but it's something that we're trying to familiarize CrossFitters with. My issue is that I go into jiu-jitsu and I want my RP at 10. I come into CrossFit, I want my RP at 10 all the time. And I've just been getting too beat up. And so one of the things that I'm going to try and work on in the near future is jiu-jitsu 3 days a week at an RPE, like maybe like 6, and then 10, like not always just throttling it, but trying to find a way to have a little bit less intensity, and then do CrossFit almost on a daily basis. So that's kind of where I'm at on my journey. I've been doing it for close to 7 years now, and I absolutely love jiu-jitsu.
So there's two different ideologies here. So Jason Khalipa, I'm sure you've back squatted near 500, deadlifted well over 500, bench press close to 400. Like, you're a guy where it's a different scenario with you, and it's different for you to grasp because I've worked with a bunch of jiu-jitsu players at my gym. We had a little exchange going. They would teach me on the mats, and then I would coach them. And to see, like, I cannot make that comparison of my own ability in the gym to them in the gym. So like, what I could do, honest to God, is like just take time off the gym altogether. And when I get in the gym, just like get a pump, feel good. For those guys though, like they do really need to build from nothing. Like they really so what I realized with them was we would push in the gym, but in a way that was very pointed and very like, a term that CrossFit used, how they talk about quantifiable. Yeah. So is very quantifiable, their improvements that they could make in the gym. So what we would do is, like Monday would come around, we'd do a pretty long warm-up, intensive warm-up. We would do some sort of like circuit that would get our legs ready. And then we would do 3 or 4 or 5 warm-up sets of back squat. Then we would do 5 working sets of back squats. Then we would do 2 accessories and leave the gym. So that is back squat takes almost 45 minutes of the training session just to back squat, and then 15 minutes of accessories, and then they're out. And what I realize is, okay, so their mental acuity, because the mats kill them every time they're on the mats, it kills them. Their mental acuity is like very small. So if I can make it so that, hey guys, today, all you're doing is squatting and getting your fucking legs stronger. When I started to do stuff like that with them, I could see the difference happening. It was the moment where I was like, hey, we're going to do Toriando passing, like for time, like, or we would do the very specific stuff. And even when we started doing conditioning work, I could see them just be like, ugh, Yeah. So my goal was just producing force through the floor. If I can get people to take people down better, if I can get people to be more explosive passing guard, whatever it may be, then my goal is good. And I don't want to do anything else. But for a guy like Jason Khalipa, I don't know how I would train you in the gym. It's like, I don't know how much it matters.
Well, it's a really interesting, you bring up a really good point. I think it's an important note for anybody interested in strength conditioning, is that here's what's so funny about jiu-jitsu. The better you get, the shittier shape you could be in. It's the weirdest thing, because if you're a black belt in your gym that's really talented, like I work with Mason Fowler out here in San Jose. He's one of the best grapplers in the world.
I love Mason. I just want to interrupt. I love Mason because he won Brasileiros as an American. So I have to put that in there. Yes.
He's great. But what I noticed with him was that he's so good that unless he's in like a Shark Tank situation where like a new fresh guy comes in every 2-3 minutes, he rarely needs a red line himself because he's so efficient. And so what I found that grapplers need is 3 key things. Number 1, pure strength, like what we're talking about. Power to the floor, back squat, foundational lifts. 100%, they don't get that because they get a lot of body weight stuff because of jiu-jitsu, right? So gi or no gi, the goal for me is not to be sport specific with them, meaning like I'm not doing Toriano passes. I thought for a while, oh, let's do Turkish get-ups. Let's do stuff that's like, really related to your sport. And I realized like, dude, they get enough of that shit on the mat. Like let's focus mainly on like the big picture, right? So I agree with you 100%. Number 1 is pure strength. Number 2 is red line. It is very rare for a very high level grappler to red line unless they're in very unique positions because they're so efficient and so good. I mean, when's the last time you watched Gordon Ryan in a fight really red line? I mean, like be physically and mentally exhausted. So I think that there's benefits within reason to do like 1 to 3 minute intervals of high intensity, like the air bike, to really get like that short anaerobic aggressive red line. Cause I don't know that at the highest level, you get that that often. There's exceptions, but in general, those are 2. And then the third one is overhead mobility. So what I've found with jiu-jitsu athletes is their ankle, their hip range of motion is actually pretty incredible because of their ability to work positions through
it's all guard retention. Yep.
That's
all it is. Yep.
But their shoulder range of motion in particular, their rounded position, especially from wrestlers having a background.
And always getting your head pulled down, man. That's what I felt.
Right.
Especially no-gi. I think no-gi is worse than the gi because the gi, you can grab the lapel and it doesn't pull the head down. Like there's not as much head management.
That's right. So if you're getting, any tied up in anything, I find that in general, and this is not everybody. So please don't listen to this and be like, oh, this guy's full of shit. It's like, dude, in general, what I've noticed is that at high level grapplers, their shoulder range of motion, even to hang from a bar, is just not there. But if you have them do it like once a week, strict pull-ups, you'd be shocked at how quickly they improve.
So that was it for me. Those were the foundational movements. We kind of went away from front squatting. It was, we went away from back squatting. We did front squatting. So front squatting, deadlifts, a lot of pull-ups. Wildly enough, we did a lot of bench press. I mean, it was very just like meathead type of stuff. But I always, because these guys were particularly no-gi guys, I always did like I was really big into shoulder prehab. And even if it was just like doing handstands on the wall, handstands on the wall paired with bar hangs, you're getting both, stability aspects, like being able to stabilize and pull your lats down and then being also able to press up. Those were 2 things that were huge with these guys. And I think, if we're looking at like the gi, at least this is how I felt. The gi messed my low back up. No gi messed my shoulder and my neck up. Like I could hardly like turn my neck. You know what I'm saying? And because the reason why I think is like, if you're playing guard, somebody has a grip on your pants, which basically is just like having a handle on your leg, and they can manage your leg and put your leg in positions that it shouldn't be in because of the handle, and you're not getting past, you're just being held there. And all of that stress goes to your low back and you're trying to like isometrically stabilize your low back. And so for me, it was like, God, I couldn't back squat. I couldn't deadlift. I couldn't do anything without just
grappling,
feeling so weak. And that was for the gi. Now for the no gi stuff, I think your legs and your hips feel kind of fresh. But again, it's the neck. The neck is just so bad for those guys.
How long did you do jiu-jitsu for?
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the reverse hyper is a great tool. So a couple things to discuss here. One, I think that if effectively warming up for any jiu-jitsu session is like so more important than anybody could put perspective on, like flow rolling and hip opening and low back opening and core re-engagement drills beforehand, I think have been life changers for me before you roll to stay in a safer position. And the second thing is, I think that if you are having low back pain as a jiu-jitsu athlete, utilizing a reverse hyper could be a really good way to decompress the spine that's getting compressed in awkward positions through jiu-jitsu. And the final note there is you were talking about with pull-ups, handstands, etc. Um, when it comes to jiu-jitsu or any sport for this matter, looking at like, what is the domains that my sport is working in and what am I not getting? No matter what, you're always going to develop some type of deficiency in other areas. Let's take a marathon runner or a triathlete. Very common for a triathlete to have terrible IT bands and probably some like thoracic issues because they're in a hunched over position pretty much all the time, right? And their body is moving in a singular direction with no lateral movement. Same thing with a marathon runner. Take, for example, only a power lifter. They may have deficiencies in other areas. And so Olympic weightlifting, I think, has some really good opportunity because of it connects so many different 10 general physical skills, with the exception of maybe you can argue cardiovascular, maybe even stamina. It's more of like a just single explosive. But in jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of things you get, right? You get this anaerobic, you get aerobic, you get this good threshold, you get good coordination, you get good accuracy, agility, but you don't really get any pure strength. And I feel like long-term, that will hinder not only your performance, but also just the way your body recovers. So I'd recommend everybody getting in both. Oh, you're on mute.
Right. Sorry, I was muted. What's crazy about that is, yeah. So I think that the general strength is so like, it's interesting you say this because everyone that's come out of the strength world and gone into martial arts says the exact same thing. The one big pushback we say that we see is, technique over strength. It's like no one ever said that was untrue, but I've actually heard Gordon say this quite a bit. He's like, dude, strength is like super important, like incredibly important. It's like a massive part of his game. It's a massive part of everyone's game. Like, yeah, he understands jiu-jitsu in every single facet, but a lot of the things he does because he's strong, and he'll be the first to do that. And I also think the more strength you have, potentially the less effort you actually have to do something. Right. Yeah. Because, this is a very bro way of looking at things, because there is there's a point at which this doesn't work out. So like, if I can deadlift 500 pounds, 100 pounds, I don't have to use that much effort. Right. That works up into a certain extent because there's differences in the force velocity curve. But the same thing can be true. If you're a very efficient grappler and you become much stronger, that move that you had to make it's less effortful. Yeah. Less effortful means you can do more reps. And in every single sport in existence, whoever can do more wins. Whoever can do the most wins, because they can, and by the way, there's a lot to that, but whoever can do the most and be able to recover and do the most again will always win. And whoever can do that the longest is always it's the same thing. It works for them. And so you're always looking for these places where you can be like, where can I do more? Where can I do more and more and more? And some of these guys, the big mistake they make is, well, I can just do more on the mats.
Yeah.
But you're not improving anything.
Well, think about it this way. Mark Bell says it best, like, strength is never a weakness. Excuse me. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength, is Mark Bell. And I think that the one caveat I will say to what I'm about to say is that if a jiu-jitsu athlete increases their strength so much that their legs become too big or their body becomes too big where they cannot hit weight classes and or they can't have the range of motion they did and or they can't get people in positions anymore because they're too big, that is now a factor for their sport. So
yes,
that's the one caveat, is that if you become too big that you can't triangle someone because your legs are too big, that's a problem. Yeah. So they should only get so big as to not impact your range of motion and your ability to get people in position. So, but all things being equal, which is going to be very rare for someone to get so big they can't get in those positions, for example, the strength is a key component, because if you think about it like this, like if two people have the exact same technique, but one is stronger than the other, I imagine the person that's stronger will probably end up winning. And I think most people would probably agree with that, assuming they have the same technical proficiency. And I think that another factor to think about, which is an important one for jiu-jitsu, is this idea that there's a law of diminishing return. So where are you going to get more bang for your
diminishing
buck?
returns. That's what I was looking for. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But here's something that, like, okay, take me, for example. If I only wanted to grapple, like, for example, I competed at Master Worlds and I competed a week later at another event. This year, I want to compete at Master Worlds too. I do not need, if I had a coach advising me on what I need, they're going to tell me you should stop doing any CrossFit right now for the next 4 months. And you should spend, or not, maybe not any, but for the most part, and you should spend most of your time on the mat developing additional skills. Because my weak point, I could go into jiu-jitsu and make 10, 20, 30% gains like that, because I'm not as technically proficient as a, 3-stripe black belt or whatever it is. Whereas the black belt, I'd be wondering if for them to get 10% gains in jiu-jitsu, dude, if they've been doing it for 20 years, it might be very difficult. But if they come off the mat, increase their strength conditioning, I bet you it'll improve their jiu-jitsu 10%. You know what I mean? Like,
yes. So let's think about it like this. Let's separate it into training and adaptive training.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, and this is, these are, if we look at some of the concepts, and I don't know if you know who Chad Wesley Smith is, but these are these concepts in his book, The Scientific Principles of Strength Training. It's fantastic, but we can look at things in terms of like effective dosages, and the better that you get, the more of a dosage you need in order to make adaptive changes.
Yeah.
So imagine that you're somebody who gets on the mats 10 times a week, which a lot of pro grapplers are doing. They're either rotating between 7 and 10 a week, right? Sometimes it's just once a day, sometimes it's 2 times a day, and they mix in lifting as well at the same time. If we're to say, hey, the only way to get better at jiu-jitsu is to do more jiu-jitsu, it's like, how the fuck is that even possible? And if it are those reps going to be adaptive reps? Are they going to change you? And that's what people need to self-audit. And so when I say, more, the person who does the most is going to win, that there's obviously nuance to that, right? Like whoever does the most adaptive repetitions or whatever they're doing that can help them adapt and then recover is going to win. That's how I feel 100%. But I love that idea of comparing the black belt to the Jason Khalipa. I'm the same way. The problem that I found was my strength was a big hindrance to me because I wasn't efficient. I would use too much strength and I would get tired. Straight up.
Yeah.
Like passing somebody, like I would do it and I would do it like the way that I was taught, but it would just be a little bit more effort. And because I do have a 660-pound deadlift, I just used a lot of potential energy. And now there's no coming back from that. And that's where I found where I was like, man, I got to get out of the weight room here. I have to and I just have to get my conditioning and my specific conditioning up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about in jiu-jitsu, there's like 3 levers I think you could pull. And by the way, I am not an expert at jiu-jitsu. I've been doing it for a while and I love it, but I'm not an expert. But I have a background in strength conditioning like you. And I think there's like 3 levers when I think about it. You have traditional jiu-jitsu, let's just say leg entanglements, arm bars, mount, your typical jiu-jitsu on the ground, right? Then you have wrestling skills, which I think you're seeing more and more wrestling coming into play from a standing position, especially no-gi, right? Because you don't have the lapels to grab onto. And then I'd say the third factor is probably strength conditioning. And again, someone with more background might say, hey, there's a 4th factor, which is judo, or perhaps, because there's no striking involved. So
maybe some endurance might be a factor, maybe something
sure.
like that. Yeah, sure. But
sure. But what I'm saying is if you look at those 3 so like take, for example, the CrossFit Games, I would do a reflection after each CrossFit Games every year. And I'd say, where am I winning? Where am I losing? And when I looked at the results across 15 events, it'd be like top 10, top 10, top 10, top 10, 50th, top 10, top 10, top 10. Well, it's like, well, shit, I know where I got to work on. And I think if any jiu-jitsu is listening, athlete, they could just look at their game and say, where are they top 10 and where are they losing? And then they start spending a little bit of time on that to level up their game, you know?
That requires more auditing because those things aren't listed in event wins or losses.
Of course.
Right. But okay, when you go into the gym and where everyone's lining up on the wall and you're doing specific drilling, live drilling, what's the thing that you don't want to be doing? So, a lot of people, like for me, I didn't really have anything that I really wanted to do. However, if it was like, all right, winner stays, and if you stay, you're on your back and you're in De La Hiva with like a collar grip. That's where I want to be. So I'm like, my eyes light up. I'm like, yes, we're doing this. Yeah. Then we'll do takedowns only. Takedowns only, winner stays. It's like, okay, now everyone's kind of like on the wall, just like, I don't know, man. Yeah. And that's like, okay, well, that's the thing that you suck at. That's it. That's the feeling. It's like, it's okay. You go to CrossFit and you're like, I don't know what you were bad at, Jason. I don't know entirely what you were weak at.
Traditionally, it'd be like, compared to my peers, longer distance only endurance workouts, like body weight workouts, like ring dips and muscle ups.
Okay. So it was something like that feeling that you get. It's like, okay, well, I got to fucking work on that. Right. I love that idea. I want to shift just a little bit into kind of like the final part here. I feel, and this is a theory that I've come up with, and I was talking with some people in CrossFit. I feel as though CrossFit it's at a next level of evolution where the athletes are now, most of the top 10 athlete or top 20 on each side, women and men, are making six figures. They have over six figures followings on Instagram, YouTube, what have you. This is very professionalized now. And what we're seeing, at least I would love to see statistics on this, but the average age seems to be going down.
Yeah.
And my theory with this is, like, if you look at Olympic sports, the best women are going to have breakout seasons, I'd say 18 and then, 19, whatever, but 18 years old. And sometimes I think swimming and diving, I think of gymnastics. I mean, weightlifting, women in weightlifting. I mean, 18 years old, like, you're in the mix. And I think men, it's probably 21, 22, 23. Justin Medeiros is 23 years old. I don't think many people are talking about this, but if, the woman who just won, or young woman who just won, is Mal O'Brien. And like, people are like, whoa, she's so young. It's like, well, not really anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I think if we look at biologically, females go through puberty earlier. And at about 18, all of that puberty is settled in, and they can take the most possible volume that it's humanly possible. An 18-year-old girl is going to be able to take the most amount of a beating in training. And I think that's when you see these girls just pedal to the metal. I don't even want to know what Mal O'Brien does, but I feel like the men, Justin Medeiros, 23 years old, it's the same thing. How do you feel about that? I feel like you were competing almost into your 30s, right?
Yeah. It's a really interesting observation. I mean, I could also probably, so I agree with you. I want to start by that. I could probably also make the debate that Tia Toomey is by far the greatest, female ever. Not even close. And she's pregnant right now. When you look at Mal O'Brien, right? Mal is 19 years old. When you look at Paige Powers, she's 20 years old. She took second. Emma Lawson in third, 18 years old. Now, the open is one expression of fitness because it's kind of skewed. Although I do think it's a good indicator, it's also not the same as, underneath the bright lights, whatever, because you could redo it. But look, let's see. Most of these girls, there's the oldest one in the top 10, the oldest girl in the top 10 is Amanda Barnard, who's 31, which is a pretty big outlier. Most of these girls are younger. So yeah, good observation. I think what happened is, CrossFit kind of blew up. Let's just say, I don't know. What do you think? 10 years ago, give or take?
I would say 20, 14 is when it got really big.
Sure. So almost 10 years ago. And I think, a lot of parents kind of started finding it, changed their life. And so they started introducing their kids at an appropriate age. Like, for example, my daughter and I would work out every morning in the garage. And so they get interested in it. I personally think that kids should be doing group sports and they should be doing traditional sports. However, they should also be adding in some CrossFit and strength conditioning. I think they should be doing both. But, that's just my take on it. But yes, I think you're right. People, it's definitely getting younger and it has professionalized more. And I want to see them make money and be successful.
Yeah. Isn't that wild though? Like that. And I think I definitely want to talk more about it. And I'd love to see there's great people on the internet who like Brian Friend. I don't know if you know who he is. Yeah, he's like really good at doing the math on these things. And it's really cool to finally have statistics on this sport. It's like to really realize, because this is a numbers game. If we look at what everyone was always saying about this, it's quantifiable, repeatable, right? Like if those are true, then numbers need to be an objectively important part of this thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think like, Olympians, the best ones, train the hardest. That's it. And the best most of the time, I think team sports can be a little bit different. Football training isn't as important as just being a good athlete.
But and good team camaraderie and,
right.
and good coaching
and a good leader. Yeah. And CrossFit, it's not saying that you don't have to be a good athlete. Of course you have to be a tremendous athlete, be able to pick up skills and do all these different things. But your training is so goddamn important.
It's work capacity. It's work capacity and recovery. That's it. Like,
and so who can do it the most? It's a competition of who can do it the most. And right now you're going to look at 18-year-old women and 23-year-old men, maybe slightly earlier than that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head about like what you were saying earlier. I think you can make arguments against for certain sports, but in CrossFit terms, you're right. Like who could do the most, who can recover the best, who can keep doing it for longer. Because ultimately the CrossFit Games are an endurance event. It's a week long of a shit ton of events. And it's about, who's prepared to go perform, but also be able to recover and get back on it. And I think those are ways that people are training now. When I used to train, I do think people are smarter with their training now. But I mean, I remember in 2009, we started doing double days and that was like unheard of. And then it started escalating even more from that. And now I don't even know what they do. They probably just live in the gym.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like I said, I don't want to know what Mal does. She just, to me, seems like how could you go about beating someone like that? Like it's crazy.
Yeah. And it brings up a really good point though, too, about the professionals in the sport is like, I am concerned about where the sport's going to go with the demands on the athletes. So for example, how do you break into a group of athletes when you have Mal O'Brien and others and congratulations to them from breaking away. But how do you go from like a mid-tier athlete who's like training, but also has a full-time job, trying to figure stuff out, whatever, to then breaking away to be able to do this full-time, to make the commitment to be able to compete with people who are doing it full-time? I'm wondering if there'll further be this gap between people who are doing it full-time and people who are trying to get there. But I wonder what'll happen,
Yeah. But I mean, dude, that's just how it works. It's just
100%.
It's like basketball had the same thing. Like football, at some point, there was a bigger gap. It's making it to regionals in 2013, 2012, like even 2011. Like it was very hard. Don't get me wrong, but I knew a ton of people that like not almost every gym, but most of the gyms that I trained at throughout those years, like had someone going, and they were tremendous athletes, but they weren't these people,
Right.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And I think, I don't know. It's like, I have this feeling that CrossFit is back, but I'm sure at some point I'll get tired of it. And it's so funny how we all have like these like afflictions where we like put all of our interest and then all of a sudden it just gets old and we go over here. It's like, that's what Jiu Jitsu could be for us at sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like, it's been interesting. Like, I've always loved CrossFit since I was introduced to it in 2006. I've always loved the methodology. I've always loved the community. Had a difference of opinion with some of the leadership at some points there's a bunch of reasons. Doesn't really matter. But I'm excited for the future where CrossFit is going. And same thing, like, but for me, dude, like I just got done doing a workout and I love adding in jiu-jitsu. I think that I think for me, like my normal go-to right now is I cold plunge in the morning and I work out with my daughter. And then I either do jiu-jitsu or CrossFit. And then depending if I do just jiu-jitsu, I'll then add in some like supplemental strength work. But it's a good blend for me. It's where I found good. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I'll typically go for like longer rucks or longer bike rides. And it's just been a nice way to kind of switch it up. I'd recommend anybody trying to find a blend, because if you're just doing one thing, dude, after doing it for 15, 20 years, you're probably going to get burnt out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, Jason, I think we're going to end it there. I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, man, it's so funny that our worlds end up colliding in a few different ways, jiu-jitsu being one of them, but it's always a pleasure meeting new people and getting to talk about the stuff that I love the most.
Yeah, man, I could talk about this stuff for all day long.
So, okay, to find you, obviously Jason Khalipa on Instagram, but your podcast, what else
podcast,
do you have?
You can just look up Jason Khalipa. It's called Effort Over Everything. That's our podcast. We talk a lot about gym ownership. I have a show on Mondays called Coffee with Khalipa. It's a nice, like short format, just like something that's on my mind, with business, family, life, etc. And, if you're in the Bay Area, California, visit an NC Fit gym. If you're a gym owner, hit us up. We have a bunch of resources for you. So yeah, we got an app. We got everything. Just check it out. NC Fit.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.